Hi. It's me again, Carl, guide to the past. Come back with me to Guatemala. I have something for your memory. And after that, we'll take a look for the lost continents and maybe even a peek at the Bermuda Triangle. Do come along. In my previous videos, I introduced the magnificent code system involving the world's pyramids, mounds, maps, and numbers. It all ran the spectrum from simplicity to apparent confusion, as it was supposed to. No one can design a top-secret communication system and leave it right out in the open for everyone to see and trip over unless it is carefully arranged to confuse the undisciplined mind. And the key to that was numbers. Why numbers? Because most people don't like them and prefer to avoid them. Even worse, the undisciplined mind can assert meanings to numbers that can look logical but be something else. And it does happen. For example, from the ancient science of gematria come a host of well-organized rational numbers, sacred numbers, which few people understand. A few are shown here. For example, 144 and 432. The 432 being 3 times 144. Other of these numbers, such as 54, 96, or 2160, while they are often considered sacred, are not gematrian. But when one looks closely, all of these numbers can be found. For example, one of these gematrian holy numbers, 144, was used in grid positioning of certain pyramids, among them the bent pyramid of Seneferu at Dashur and the smaller El Kula pyramid, both of which are in Egypt. But why? Presently unknown. Although gematrian scholars are unanimous in their beliefs that the number 144 means light. Again, why? If the El Kula and bent pyramids do represent light, why don't they light up for us? Or at least glow? Where's the switch that turns them on? A frequency, perhaps? A musical note? Maybe from a trumpet or a host of trumpets? What will it take to prove the gematrians' theories or belief systems, or to disprove them? Even the higher gematrian number of 432 was used in the pyramid grid system, its representative being the so-called false pyramid at Meidum, Egypt. It is called false because it isn't all there anymore, apparently having collapsed because its outer casing stones lie in a heap of rubble at its base. Why? Faulty construction techniques? That I will never believe. More likely it was something else. Something probably deliberate. If frequency and vibration are somehow representative of gematrian numbers, it might have been a sustained musical note that shook this pyramid apart. You know, like the frequency that tore the Tacoma Narrows Bridge apart about a half-century ago. Wow. If that's the case, then it was probably a good idea to have established our standard A note in music at 440 vibrations per second rather than 432. There's no telling what our loud rap music might have been able to do to these ancient monuments. On the other hand, there are many levels to the code, and any numbers it uses could, and frequently do, have multiple meanings and intent, and may not be what some folks think they should be. Another anciently used number was 96. Considered sacred to some, it is not geometrian, but it was used on one of the pyramids at Tikal in Guatemala. This one is known as Temple 1, the Temple of the Giant Jaguar. It is taller than it is wide at its base. Steeper are its sides than any pyramid ever built in Egypt. And on its face or facade are 96 steps. What do they mean? Nothing apparent, even to a number cruncher, unless multiplied by some other number. Hence they can be made to say almost anything we want them to, according to one's belief system or imagination. But in order to find the intended meaning of Temple 1's 96, we must get into the architect's mind. How do we do that today? He's been dead for centuries. We'll have to study his pyramid logic, and that of the global matrix to which he was responsible. Now here's the kicker. Once we do that properly, the pyramids of the global matrix system become as the individual pages of an encyclopedia. And its first chapter deals with Earth history. One-third of the way around the Earth, to the west of the Giza Prime Meridian, is the original 120th meridian. Between it and the 121st meridian are a number of aboriginal pyramid sites, ranging from the far north down into Central America. They include Rock Lakes Pyramids in Wisconsin, Uxmal in Mexico, Tikal in Guatemala, Copan in Honduras. Of this group, the largest of the pyramids involved are those at Tikal, including Temple 1. The most unusual site within this narrow band is Rock Lake and its several submerged pyramids. Now, why would anyone, bother building stone pyramids in a natural depression and, upon completing them, deliberately flood the site with the water that makes up modern Rock Lake? Unless they are trying to explain something to us, which we're unable to see or find. Notice that the code's grid latitudes for both Rock Lake's Delta Mound and Tikal's Temple 1 are identical, 2788.548. Rock Lake's Delta Mound, then, is referring the investigator directly to Temple 1. Something in or on Temple 1 is somehow significant to an as yet unclear scenario. But what is it? Pay close attention to the code's logic here. Rock Lake's pyramids are all submerged and therefore difficult to investigate. Such work requires scuba gear. Tikal, conversely, is high and dry and easily studied. Does this combination of Rock Lake and Tikal provide certain data toward the rediscovery of some other submerged ancient site somewhere? And if so, where is it? It's in the west, in the direction that Temple 1 faces, at Tikal. West to the Pacific Ocean, Hawaii, Japan, and beyond. But what's out there? Those 96 steps on its facade will explain. They face westward, the long way back to the prime meridian at Giza. So take the problem to Giza, and from there, come back eastward from Giza, a total of 96 meridians, to the Ryukyu Islands southwest of Japan. On our modern maps, that would be 127 degrees east of Greenwich, but that doesn't concern us here. It is right here, at 96 degrees and 45 minutes to the east of Giza, where scuba divers have recently found temples submerged beneath the waters of the Pacific Ocean. The 96 steps on Temple 1's westward-facing facade then directly convert to meridians. They weren't just numbers to crunch. They have deliberate meaning. Yet why do these Lemurian ruins go over to 96 degrees 45 minutes? Why not exactly 96 degrees as Temple 1's steps indicate? Tikal itself was not built at exactly 120 degrees west Giza longitude. It is found at 120 degrees and 45 minutes. Temple 1's 96 steps show us the 96 degrees position of Okinawa's submerged ruins. Tikal itself explains the 45 minutes. A simple scenario, what? Tikal's Temple 1, high and dry, taps the logic from Rock Lake submerged pyramids and transmits it westward in the direction it faces to explain where to find those submerged ruins off Okinawa. Magnificent. So if we ever wish to find the fabled lost continents of the past, well, now we know how it's done. Earth history, and beautifully recorded through numbers and maps, not moldy or flaking charts showing X marks the spot, too primitive in concept. Besides, why should the ancients have written anything to us on parchments of any kind? They were very well aware that such documents would never survive to reach us because time is not kind to mediums of that nature. It was far more logical for them to have used our maps. So always count the steps on Western pyramids. They can be quite informative. And it sure beats excavating ancient sites for broken ceramics and arrowheads and then writing erroneous historical concepts around them. Okay, so much for Tikal's Temple 1. Next, notice that right in front of it, across the plaza, is Temple 2, which faces east. Temple 1 faces west and found Lemurian ruins by way of its 96 steps. Does it not follow that Temple 2, facing east, could find the sunken temples of Atlantis? All we should need is a step count, right? Short, squat, east-facing Temple 2, the Temple of the Masks, shows us a total of 59 steps on its facade. In keeping with Temple 1's logic, these 59 steps have to mean 59 meridians, this time to the west of Giza. On modern maps, that would be some 28 degrees west of Greenwich, or nearly on top of the cruiser seamount, just off to the east of the Atlantis fracture zone on the mid-Atlantic ridge. What's out there at that zip code? Half-mile deep ocean, the bottom being far too deep for scuba divers. Further, the isostatic equilibrium in this region is about as stable as a politician's promise. What was once up above water went down and won't stay down. Back in 1882, a ship named the Jesmond was making a routine trip from the Med over to New Orleans when it suddenly encountered an unknown, dripping wet landmass in its path. It wasn't a mirage either, because some of the crew longboated their way over to it for a look-see. They even gathered up some artifacts. The Jesmond's skipper logged a strange account, and with it, its coordinates. 28 degrees, 40 minutes west Greenwich. May I remind everyone that a ship's log is a legal document and will stand up in any court in the world. On the Jesmond's return trip, that landmass was gone. 28 degrees, 40 minutes west Greenwich converts to 59 degrees, 48 minutes west of Giza on original maps, or within 3 miles of Temple 2's call. The Jesmond found a chunk of Atlantis. Another of Tikal's pyramids is Temple 5, seen here in a strictly conceptual view because, well, all those steps you see on its facade aren't there anymore. Indeed, they've been gone since before the 19th century when Mahler first studied Tikal. Somewhere along its trek through time, its staircase let go and collapsed into a heap of rubble at the pyramid's base. Ruined though it is, notice that Temple 5 faces north, on an azimuth which runs right between Temple 1 and Temple 2. With Temple 1 addressing Lemuria to the west and Temple 2 Atlantis to the east, it causes one to wonder what Temple 5 is trying to show us up north. Ancient Hyperborea, perhaps? Or possibly data concerning the latitudes of Lemuria and Atlantis? Possible. Remember, Temples 1 and 2 spoke of longitudes. The record must likewise refer us to latitudes in some way. Maybe following the restoration of Temple 5, if ever. So we're not done yet. How's your knowledge of ancient sites? Want to test it? It is probably the oldest pyramid site on Earth. No one knows when it was built or who built it. And when formal history speaks of it, the more interesting facts are all too frequently omitted. It is known only as pre-Inca in origin, and we're not even sure who they were. 1 culture, 3, 10... going back far beyond time. It is Bolivia's ancient site, Tiwanaku. Its most puzzling artifact by far is the so-called Gate of the Sun, or Del Sol, the largest single block sculpture ever found. Standing some 7 feet tall, 13.5 feet wide and 18 inches thick. The whole thing was somehow sculpted from a single block of andesite, which, as every geologist knows, is the hardest terrestrial rock there is. This stuff is so hard you need carbon steel to even scratch its surface. But there it is, intricately carved to within an inch of its life. But with what? Nobody, Inca or pre-Inca alike, had any steel tools at their disposal, ever, according to history. Copper tools is the limit of Aboriginal technology, and they were definitely not used on this. We moderns can duplicate this kind of fancy art, but we require a laser to do it. So who carved the Gate of the Sun? Why? How? And when? What history does not say, because it isn't even aware of it yet, is the fact that Tiwanaku itself offers a very interesting clue as to Del Sol's probable age. Like most pyramids in South America, the Acapana is today a complete wreck, dug into by treasure hunters, and its flanks have had all of their intricately carved facing stones stripped away, broken up, and put to use as roadbed for a railroad. Little more than a heap of rubble today, the Acapana Pyramid is very notable for several very obvious reasons. First, it is the most easterly of all the super pyramids in the Western Hemisphere. There's nothing between it and Egypt's pyramids. Secondly, it is the most southerly of all the super pyramids in the West. Nothing south of it. Third, the reason why it is where it is. But before I get into that, we need a crash course on a science known as paleomagnetism. For those unfamiliar with the term, it is the science which studies the intensity and direction of residual magnetism in ancient rock. Through it, we know where the poles used to be and how long they were there. Volcanic lavas exhibit a remnant magnetism in magnetite, which, when cooled and hardened, will indicate polar direction at the time of a volcano's eruption. This science has been able, using this methodology, to locate our former North Poles over a considerable period of time. Notice that the North Pole of today has only been where it is for the past 12,000 years, or from about 10,000 years before Christ. The previous North Pole was 30 degrees further south at Canada's Akpatak Island in Ungava Bay, northern Quebec, or at 60 degrees latitude on today's maps. Paleomagnetism is a recent science, not yet a century old, but someone knew it long before we did. Someone among all those finger-counting aboriginal degenerates took it upon themselves to align both the former and present poles on a common meridian which reaches all the way down to Tiwanaku. Then they built Tiwanaku to mark it for us or anyone else who might wish to study Earth history in the remote past. I know this will go down hard in academia, but map facts are map facts. No other major pyramids between Tiwanaku and Giza, and none on the Tiwanaku polar meridian. The same may be said for the other side of the Earth. Continuing this meridian from Tiwanaku up across the present and former North Pole, and down the other side of the Earth exactly 180 degrees of longitude away, this opposing meridian crosses down over Siberia and Mongolia, closely following the north-south border between China's Shenxi and Shanxi provinces, right past China's pyramid fields near Sian. Like Mexico, China has its super high-rise pyramids too, though there they are thought of simply as the man-made tombs of their ancient landlords, their pharaohs. I wonder where they caught that from. This gradually eroding monster is about 200 feet high, like the Sun Pyramid at Teotihuacan in Mexico. Here, as with the other side of the world, no other pyramids are known on this meridian all the way up to the North Pole. With no pyramids on this meridian between Tiwanaku and north, China and north, these two widely separated sites share something in common. China's Sian is very ancient, having been founded 3,200 years ago. How much older it is beyond the reach of records. But we do know that Sian is 3,200 years old, and sharing this common meridian with Tiwanaku, its virtual geographical opposite, does it not follow that Tiwanaku is at least as old? Rather than the 2,000-year age Western historians assert for it. Were Tiwanaku's unknown builders aware of China's pyramids? Were the builders of China's pyramids aware of Tiwanaku? If there is a connection, where do we find it? Here's the Tiwanaku Polar Chinese Meridian again. Remembering that we are working here entirely with longitudes, which were based upon a prime meridian at Giza's Great Pyramid, Tiwanaku's longitude was then 99 degrees, 48 minutes, 17.36 seconds west, and its opposite Chinese meridian was 80 degrees, 11 minutes, 42.63 seconds to the east. My earlier videos were predominantly math-oriented. In this video, it was my intent to avoid the math. I'm making a necessary exception here because, well, everybody's just got to see this. Reckoning from Siam's pyramids in China, their nearest neighbors off to the east are those recently found Lemurian temples off Okinawa. Earlier, Tikal's Temple 1 gave us their position at 96 degrees, 45 minutes, 03.87 seconds to the east of Giza. By applying this to the Tiwanaku Polar China Meridian seen here, we find a message concerning it from Lemuria. Notice also that I am not working here with grid longitudes, but rather actual longitudes, reckoned from the Great Pyramid's prime meridian. First, we have the meridian northward from Tiwanaku at 99:48:17 west, which, as it reaches the North Pole, becomes 80:11:42 east, and drops across China, or that region where the Lemurians migrated to. The arithmetic is 5th grade simple. Simply subtract China from Lemuria. The result here becomes the latitude of Tiwanaku on the other side of the Earth. 16 degrees, 33 minutes, and 21.235 seconds south. Take the map of Tiwanaku. Box in its known ruins from the Kalasasaya up here down to the Pumapunka. And our parallel of latitude lays right over the box. Now then, in keeping the egg before the chicken, which site is known to be older? Those submerged Lemurian ruins off Okinawa, or Tiwanaku? Lemuria existed well back into the Akpatak Ice Age. But when did it fall from accounting? According to Colonel James Churchward, it sank 8,060 years ago in a cataclysm. But did it all go down at once? Did fragments survive? The fact that these ruins off Okinawa had their longitude recorded in the 96 steps of Tikal's Temple 1, and that their position figures in prominently in the preceding geomath, certainly seems to indicate that the submerged ruins were something very special, like maybe the last political gasp of Lemuria, its final capital. The largest monument found off Okinawa so far is some 262 feet long. Its summit is 16 feet below the surface of the ocean, like that so-called Bimini Road in the Bahamas. And the ground upon which this temple sits is 65.6 feet deep. 65.6 feet? Did the long-lost Lemurians know how deeply this monument would be covered by 65.6 feet of water by the time we got here? Remember Tikal's Temple 5 with its fallen staircase? Well, as Mahler excavated the rubble, he found the bottom step and measured it at 65.6 feet in length. And that's feet, not cubits, reeds, or meters, our own 12-inch feet. How could they have known? Working only with what is known of this particular temple, and discarding the traditions of cataclysms briefly, what is known of Earth history can be somewhat revealing. During the peak of the Akpatak Ice Age, the world's oceans were some 450 feet lower than they are today. This data, furnished by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, came with a graph showing the speed at which the ocean basins refilled with water as the great glaciers began to melt. Using it as a guide, this Lemurian temple finally went under about 5,000 years ago, and the land upon which it stands went under about 7,000 years ago. That flooded all the flower beds and parking lots, and the priests had to start wearing hip boots in order to get to work. Going back 8,060 years to that point in time where Churchward dates the end of Lemuria, the oceans were still down some 88 feet. Hence, at that time, this temple was only some 22 feet above sea level, and its days were numbered. A good time to leave Lemuria. So going by no more than this temple became swamped about 7,000 years ago. As it is obvious that it was not built as the waves bathed the feet of the builders, the construction itself has to be far older than 7,000 years. Its position was then used to designate the latitude of far-off Tiwanaku, by way of the meridian math already seen here. Hence, Tiwanaku is 1. At least 7,000 years old, and 2. Resulted from a Lemurian mandate, not pre-Incan. Its maximum possible age is easy to call. This Tiwanakan polar China meridian bears upon the locations of both the past and present North Poles. Our present North Pole can be dated by paleomagnetism to no more than 12,000 years. And since this beautiful meridian could not have been laid out without it, Tiwanaku can be no more than 12,000 years old. In his academically ignored work, Churchward told us that Easter Island marked the southern boundary of ancient Lemuria. Is there a way we can demonstrate this? Sure, several. If you happen to have a globe of the Earth handy, draw a straight line over it from Giza, the grid central of remote antiquity, all the way westward to Easter Island. This line will, of course, cross South America, specifically across those mysterious plains of Nazca in Peru, and all of its lines and designs which no one has yet been able to figure out. One of the more interesting displays at Nazca is this one, the so-called Great Triangle. Now notice those several parallel lines that flow eastward from its west side. Why do they all point over toward Giza in Egypt? Let's take a closer look at the Great Triangle, shall we? The lines and designs at Nazca were made by two methods. Some were grooves cut into the pampa, while others were laid out by placing stones in rows. The Great Triangle is among the largest geometrics at Nazca. What makes the Great Triangle so unique there are those several parallel lines which point over toward Giza. What's the message here? No one has been able to figure it out, despite an endless line of top mathematicians, archaeologists, and archaeoastronomers. Their best theories fail. But suppose I told you that any 8th grader worth a C- can read the message here if he or she simply concentrates. See it? It's all the lines, isn't it? Like trying to find a single tree in a forest. Okay, let's dispose of all the lines outside the triangle, except for the two which interrupt all the parallel lines. There, that's better. We cut out the rest of the forest. Now the numbers are evident. 8 parallel lines to the west side. Of these 8 parallels, only 2 were allowed to continue eastward, where they meet 5 parallels. 8, 5, and 2, inside the triangle, where they are divided. The instruction then is to divide. 8 divided by 5 divided by 2 is 0.8. Hold that fractional number in your memory briefly. 0.8. True of any triangle is the fact that it features 180 degrees of corner angles, an average of 60 degrees each. But look again, closely. Notice that this Nazca triangle is actually 2, one within another. What are 2 180-degree triangles? 360 degrees, of course. So why didn't they simply show us a 360-degree circle instead of a triangle? There was a very logical reason for that, as we will understand a bit later. Back into your memory now and retrieve that 0.8 we were just talking about. Then multiply it by the 360 degrees of form, which gave us those numbers 8, 5, and 2. 0.8 multiplied by 360 degrees becomes 288. Now the 60-degree corners in the triangle. 288 times 60? 17,280. The 17,280 encodes the actual latitude of the Great Triangle. 14 degrees, 41 minutes, and 30.104 seconds south latitude. To find the Great Triangle's longitude to the west of the Great Pyramid at Giza, well, the triangle has 3 corners, doesn't it? Multiply its grid latitude of 17,280 by 3 and voila, 51,840, which encodes 106 degrees, 15 minutes, 32.6 seconds, right through the center of the triangle. Which means, of course, that the grid point of Nazca's Great Triangle is 3, like its 3 corners declare. And that's why they had to show us 2 triangles rather than a circle. See? 8th grader material. Very simple. Nazca, then, was not the ancient astronaut spaceport that Van Daniken thought it was. Nor do its many intersecting lines point to this or that star as archaeoastronomers thought. Nor are they pathways for superstitious Indians to follow in order to avoid contact with evil spirits. Nazca is the Rosetta Stone of the Pyramid Matrix system, and it speaks not to the stars, but to our own terrestrial ancient history, Earth history. But don't just take my word for this. Ask the man. He's there at Nazca too. His name is Manos. And he shows us numbers very carefully, very clearly. But he has no face, hence no eyes, nose, or mouth to count. All he shows are his 9 fingers, 4 in one hand and 5 in the other. And notice that right angle where his head meets his shoulder, a 90-degree right angle. Some can do this in their heads. 90 degrees times 9 times 4 times 5 equals 16,200, the figure which encodes Manos's latitude south of our equator. As for his West Giza longitude, well, that's why he shows us his 2 ears and 2 arms, 4. Multiply his grid latitude 16,200 by 4 and you can have his grid longitude 64,800. Itself encoding 106 degrees, 14 minutes, 43.6 seconds, which is exactly where Mr. Manos stands upon the Earth. Another of Nazca's curious glyphs is the so-called spiral. This spiral rests on top of a great needle. The bottom of this needle reaches the great rectangle. Rectangle on one end and a spiral on the other, both being obviously connected. What is mathematically true of any rectangle? Their corner angles will always total 360 degrees. Our first number then is 360. Next we go up to the spiral on top of the needle. We should enlarge this to have a better look at it. Notice that the spiral is an enigma to the eye, part spiral and partly separate arcs. I should point out here that most references on Nazca will show this spiral as a true spiral. Why they do so, I can't imagine. But what you see here comes from the top. A topographical map drawn up by the Instituto Geográfico Nacional in Lima, Peru, dated 17 June 1993. As most of you know, I work only from the best data sources. Here we see that our spiral enigma shows two separate, incomplete arcs on its outside. In all, 4 arcs terminating abruptly at the top, and 2 others vectoring on top of the needle. The formula can be completed in the mind. 360 degrees times 4 times 2, 2,880. Encoded behind this large rational is the actual soft latitude of the spiral, 14 degrees, 40 minutes, and 05.14 seconds. Nazca, the place of the lines and designs. That one place on the Earth deemed most suitable for a blackboard capable of getting a written message through time itself. No wind, no rain, no snow, no erosion, and a place so hostile even to vegetation that weeds won't grow. Write something here and it will still be here 1,000 years from now. To read the messages at Nazca, one has to pay close attention, as Manos in the Great Triangle explained. Every detail must be digested. Bold generalities will get you nowhere. We learned this with a spiral, which upon close examination revealed that it is not. Immediately south of the Great Triangle is the Great Rectangle. It too can be decoded. Not all of Nazca's writings are geometrics. There are fish, monkeys, spiders, birds, like the hummingbird here. And the condor, another bird. Be careful with his wing feathers during the decoding process. 6 to the east and only 5 to the west. Birds. Remember those bird men statues on Easter Island? Enough said for now. Don't want to give you too much to think about at once, or it'll confuse, as do all those lines at Nazca. Better to explain the individual trees and let the rest of the forest take care of itself. The decoding of Nazca's writing, the pyramids, mounds, great earthworks, and such, is a rigid discipline, and fun for they who have their heads on straight. There are those who try it and can't do it properly, and that's too bad, because unless it's done right, they will never reach the code's higher levels of knowledge. That's where we leave the numbers behind us. Work only with pyramids and maps, like the Tiwanaku-Akpatak polar Chinese scenario just presented. And there are even higher levels, beyond even the pyramid grid system, all the way up to hyperdimensionality itself. Care for a peek? Why not? Coming right up. Is there any such thing as pyramid power? That depends upon one's attitude. Positive people versus negative people. Positive people experimenting on their own find that food placed inside a pyramid-shaped container will last for considerable periods. Do the same with a razor blade, and its edge will stay sharp. Climb up on top of the Great Pyramid at Giza, open a bottle of spirits, hold it up on top of your head, and sparks will be generated. It's actually been done. Negative people? Napoleon once spent a night inside the Great Pyramid. Whatever it was that happened to him that night, he wouldn't discuss with anyone, nor did he ever go back inside. Then, too, the debunkers who tell us that placing food and razor blades inside pyramid-shaped containers will do nothing for them. Attitude. The real power within pyramids is still beyond human understanding, but it's real and it's boundless. It is likewise feared by the powers that be, for when it is finally understood, the world will be a much better place to live in. But it comes under the title of free energy, and the modern world runs on oil. Accordingly, anything that even hints at free energy is taboo, and we don't want it around because there's no way to meter it to the consumer. But free energy is available, and always has been. Indeed, it actually comes under the heading of universal constants. These powers are not as far beyond reach as we might imagine. We're getting closer to them all the time, and many are involved. Hosts of energies still resonating from the Big Bang itself, beyond counting, and they range from the energy needed to grow a tree to that of, well, we're getting tangled up between positive and negative attitudes again, so let me put it another way. To most of us, atom smashing is the epitome of power. There's nothing more potent. But that's a negative concept. The positive attitude knows better, as he or she recognizes the ultimate power to be love, because that's what the Creator used to spark the Big Bang. The Big Bang, a scientific term which some religions want nothing to do with. Attitudes again. This formula from Einstein says it all, for there can be no reality, indeed no creation, without the combination of energy, mass, and light. So when God gave the order, "Let there be light," the frequency or vibration of light brought energy and mass together, and bang, there it was, the entire universe. Now that utterance from the Creator had to be loud enough to be heard from one end of the universe to the other. Ever hear God yell? It had to have sounded like a big bang. You see, again, it's all a matter of attitude, positive versus negative. Love, then, is the most powerful energy of all. Down here at the human level, even we are aware of love. even though few of us fully understand it. As to the lesser energies, many exist which we are unaware of, even when we look right at them. We will review several in this presentation. One of these natural energies is demonstrated by the planets. Jupiter is the most obvious example with its big red spot. Since it was first observed, it has been perceived as a great storm in the upper atmosphere. Then along came Richard Hoagland and his UN briefing, where he announced that that storm wasn't a storm after all, because it didn't wander about as storms are supposed to. This big red phenomena remains at a given latitude of about 19.5 degrees. But if it isn't a storm, what is it? Dick advanced the theory that the big red spot is a hyperdimensional signature of some sort. If he's right, then it's one of those energies we can look right at and not recognize. Well, whatever it is, one thing's for certain. It's the signature of some kind of energy. And that was enough to spark my interest. What holds the big red spot at 19.5 degrees of latitude? Dick went on to point out another planetary curiosity over on the planet Mars. Also at 19.5 degrees of latitude is Olympus Mons, a 5-mile-high inactive volcano. Unlike Jupiter, Mars has no atmosphere and is therefore not as secretive about its surface features. We can see Olympus Mons with our probe cameras. But is its 19.5 degree position only coincidental? The fact that Olympus Mons is inactive doesn't appear to coincide with the active phenomena seen over Jupiter. Then again, Mars is a dead planet. Is it possible that Olympus Mons may have killed it? Mars is a solid planet, while Jupiter is a huge gas bag, incapable of volcano building as we understand it. Yet its big red spot is there for all to see. Conversely, if the Olympus Mons was following some universal mandate, then we do have correlations. An atmospheric signature in Jupiter's clouds, and internal energy, volcanism, on Mars, both at 19.5 degrees. While the composition of the two planets may differ, the upwelling of energy may not. On Mars it once appeared as lava. On Jupiter it's just a spinning cloud, but they could be the same energy. Okay, let's pick this up where Dick left off. He, along with all other investigators, have overlooked something quite obvious. That being, that excluding Bolivia's Acapana Pyramid, all of the super high-rise pyramids of the Western Hemisphere were built between 19 and 20 degrees north of the equator, along our own terrestrial energy belt. The 4 million square foot Sinsunsan Pyramid, the 1.1 million square foot Cholula Pyramid, the Cuicuilco Pyramid, the West's only conical supermonument, the entire ancient city of Teotihuacan and its pyramids, and even the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. Notice also that all of the other Mayan, Olmec, and Toltec sites of consequence occur within only a few degrees of latitude from this natural energy zone. None occur north of the 21st parallel, and none are found south of Copan. That only follows, as to build anything of permanence south of Copan would have been courting disaster, because below that is the Caribbean tectonic plate, and these ancients weren't dumb enough to build on fault zones. These Mexican and Guatemalan pyramid sites are trying to tell us something about the most powerful energies in nature, things that we are not yet aware of. Embarrassing, not? Our grandfathers have forgotten more than we are even able to recognize. We should keep in mind the fact that when the North Pole was down on Akpatak Island in Canada, the Earth was tilted drastically from what we know today. Quite normal to they who lived in those days, but all out of whack by our standards. This is easily demonstrated. The next time you have a spare globe of the Earth handy, there's a little shop project you can do with it. Remove it from its mount and re-drill the North Pole on Canada's Akpatak Island in Ungava Bay. You will have to re-drill the South Pole as well, exactly 180 degrees opposite. It won't be on the Antarctic continent anymore, but rather out in the Indian Ocean. Does the Perry-Reese map of an ice-free Antarctica make a little more sense now? Then put the globe back in its mount and see the true Ice Age world for what it was. When you do, notice that the equator of that period was 30 degrees further south, down in Chile. On the opposite side of the world, it was 30 degrees further to the north. China's pyramid fields, today at 34 degrees of latitude, were then at only 4 degrees, very close to the equator. But of greater interest are how the parallels of latitude then influenced the Middle East. We've all been taught that Ice Age people were savages. No math, no sciences, no sense of order, just a bunch of hunters and berry pickers. Sorry about that. I'm glad I wasn't the one selling all that nonsense to our children. Code buffs have seen this before. The modern map showing the layout of the pyramid fields at Giza. With the Great Pyramid centered at 29 degrees, 58 minutes, 51 seconds north latitude. That's now, today. But when the Akpatak North Pole was the order of the day, and the Earth was tilted as previously shown, guess where the Earth's energy zone was then? Giza. 19.5 degrees north of the Ice Age equator. And Giza's pyramids were already in place, sucking up all the juice. Hey, don't take my word for it. Check it out for yourself. Find a globe of the Earth and measure the distance between Akpatak Island and Giza. 70.5 degrees. Then subtract that from the then 90-degree Akpatak pole. 19.5 degrees will remain. The globe doesn't lie. The maps don't lie. Only history does, with its urging that Egypt's pyramids were built by pharaohs only 4,000 odd years ago. If that had any substance to it, Giza's pyramids would now be down in northern Sudan at our 19.5 degree energy zone. Or about where those virtually unknown Sudanese pyramids are, or used to be. They don't get a lot of publicity these days. Too small, too ruined, and in an out-of-the-way third world country that seems to be getting closer to fourth. Yet, what kind of energy is it that concentrates itself along the 19-degree 30-minute parallel? Obviously, it is an upwelling from a planet's interior. It is too powerful to be seen here on Earth. Yet over on Jupiter, it's able to punch its way through its crushing gravity and leave its signature in the clouds 200 miles up. On Mars, it seems to have exhausted itself through Olympus Mons. Here on Earth, it's also venting itself through Hawaii's Kilauea volcano, which also situates itself at 19.5 degrees of latitude. Kilauea has been upchucking liquid rock almost continuously now since 1984, as the pent-up energy in our own energy band tries to relieve itself. Is that what happened over on Mars? Did it burn itself out? Are we in for the same scenario over here on Earth? The reason I have to ask that is because of Hawaii's global position. I didn't notice it until I drew the parallels on my Ice Age globe, but Hawaii lies on an intersect with the Ice Age 20th parallel. The only other place this happens is over in the African nation of Niger. 20 degrees north, then and now. Hawaii, then, has been basking in this 19.5 degree energy belt not only for 12,000, but for 48,000 years, back to the beginning of the Akpatak Ice Age. Hence, has to be one of the most powerful energy points on Earth, or weakest, depending upon one's viewpoint. But Kilauea does show us something that we've all missed: anti-gravity in motion. All of the Earth's volcanoes have erupted at one time or another, or they wouldn't be there. But those located in the 19.5 degree energy band may be trying to tell us something extra special. If volcanoes can show us anti-gravity by throwing up liquid rock, shouldn't it be possible to so lift solid rock? There are oral traditions of such back in antiquity, and they're still maintained today. Along the Ice Age energy belt, as it ran across Giza, we have all those 2 to 20-ton stone blocks in its pyramids, and we haven't yet figured out how they were moved. Just our own primitive belief systems involving wooden rollers and ramps. Only 1 degree to the north, on the Ice Age globe, is Lebanon and its Baalbek site. Same problem in understanding. There we find the largest dressed stone ever discovered. It weighs an estimated 2,000 tons. Even we can't move it. This energy band, during the Ice Age, when the equator was down toward the bottom of South America, was very close to sacred Inca sites like Cuzco and Sacsayhuaman, where we find all those great cyclopean stones. Surviving legends insist that they were all floated into position by the gods. Gods? Maybe aliens? It was far more likely that our own human ancestors did this. Why, when our dogmatized minds come up against something we can't understand or figure out, we seem compelled to blame it on extraterrestrials? There are unconfirmed reports of shamans who are able to float rocks with sound today, over in India and Burma, near our modern 19.5 degree belt. So if these disciplined modern men can do it today, why not in the remote past? Forget this alien nonsense. Not that I reject the possibility of their actual existence, but I'm sure they had better things to do than drop by our world and build monuments for us. It's illogical. As this ancient 19.5 energy band ran westward across the wide Pacific Ocean, it likewise came close to another puzzling ancient site, the one we call Nan Madol, where several million stone prisms in the 5 to 20-ton variety were arranged in a most unusual construction, resembling forts. Nan Madol makes no more sense than Tiwanaku. No preceding culture and no long-term development. It's like it was suddenly there. Ask a native and you'll hear 2 brothers floated the stones through the air. Like Tiwanaku, the legends insist the whole place was built in a single day. Yeah, right. Yet if 2 fellows can float 25-ton rocks through mid-air, sounds easy enough, There's no telling how fast they might have worked. They may have thrown rocks around like we throw rice at a wedding, a long-lost skill. And would you look at the construction methods? 12 to 25-foot long stone prisms stacked up log cabin style. Absolutely unique among ancient constructions, yet much faster than the tight-fitting Cyclopean blocks at, say, Cuzco or Giza. Just slop them in place. Maybe it was done in a day. But why? Is Nan Madol a fort, seawall, temple? And to what ancient culture did it belong? Might it be something left over from Lemuria? There's a quick way to find out. Remember those 96 steps on Temple 1 at Tikal, and how they found those submerged Lemurian ruins off Okinawa? What's the most obvious number at Nan Madol? Right, the 90-degree angles at which its stone prisms were laid. 90 degrees times 96 steps equals 8,640. This number encoding its latitude of 6 degrees, 50 minutes, 28.8 seconds north. A lot of work at Nan Madol. More rock than was used in the Great Pyramid. And they even built the island they put it on. Can these ancient sites be dated according to their present or former positions in this natural energy band? We've been using C14, but maybe there's another way. The logic is simple enough. In Mexico, we have stone pyramids in the band, but none of them involve megalithic rocks. They're all built of common fieldstone, except for the huge Cholula pyramid and its adobe brick construction. Down in South America, stone structures appear limited to Cuzco, Sacsayhuaman, Malchingui, Tiwanaku. Its hundreds of other scattered pyramids are built of adobe brick, mud brick, and El Nino is erasing them brick by brick. Mud bricks are hand-carried, but Cyclopean blocks are not. In North America, no Cyclopean blocks anywhere, mostly dirt pyramids, a handful of minor stoneworks. Africa and the Middle East, Egypt's pyramids in the Ice Age energy band, Baalbek, and that's about it. Huge rocks. In today's energy band, only those Sudanese pyramids, not such large rocks. Elsewhere, mostly mud brick. South of the equator, the only stone ruins are at Zimbabwe, about 19 degrees south. No megalithic rocks there, just hand-carried fieldstone. Ice Age, 19.5 degrees, Cyclopean blocks. Modern, 19.5 degrees, fieldstone. Obviously, someone back in the Ice Age knew how to float rock in midair, most likely by using sound waves. A lost art today, but it was used in reverse when Jericho's walls came down. Since then, silence. Conclusion? Simple. Egypt's pyramids are not 4,000 years old. We need to multiply that by 3. These energy bands tell it like it is. It would appear from all of this evidence that our degenerate ancestors were well acquainted with the Earth's 19.5 degree energy band, and may have tapped its unknown energies for the mutual benefit of all. Stone floating may only be the tip of the iceberg. Still unresolved today is the evidence of human rejuvenation, as recorded in the Bible. Archaeology and anthropology don't seem to want anything to do with it, but as recently as 5,000 years ago, in the flood-ravaged land where the biblical patriarchs lived, people were enjoying lifespans that were incredible by modern standards. It's in the historical record. Adam lived 930 years, Seth 912 years, Enos 905 years, Jared 962, Enoch 365, Methuselah 969, and even Noah, who didn't even become a father until he was 500 years old. Their Viagra must have been something. Wherever it was Noah escaped from, cellular rejuvenation was still in vogue. But he moved, and when he did, it was lost. Natural degeneration replaced it. Humanity had to start over. Now, as for Dick Hoagland's theory that the 19.5-degree energy bands may have hyperdimensional qualities, consider carefully the fact that the lower corners of all of the world's vile vortices are in contact with it. They are rooted at 19.5 degrees of latitude. Why hasn't someone else noticed? Why me? Most people are aware of the strange vanishings in the Bermuda Triangle, but officially no one cares. Its mysteries cannot be resolved by our present lines of investigation, therefore the triangle doesn't exist, except to those who vanished in it. Well, that which we call science isn't real either. It's only half on. For example, why hasn't anyone noticed that ever since Hawaii's Kilauea has been relieving the internal pressures along our 19.5 degree energy band, vanishings in the Bermuda Triangle have hit a low. By itself, that is sufficient evidence to show that this energy band has a certain extra-dimensional characteristic. It may even be multidimensional. Indications are that when Kilauea finally turns itself off, the activities in the vile vortices will resume, and once again people, ships, and planes will begin vanishing as before. But what can turn Kilauea off? And when? For those answers, we must inquire of two other sciences, geology and oceanography. In geology, it is known that the Earth's crust varies in its thickness from about 25 miles under the continental plates to only 2 or 3 miles beneath the oceans. All of these plates float on the asthenosphere. That's a $10 word for lava. Press down on this zone and its underlying lava is displaced. Looks for a convenient vent or volcano, and the Earth upchucks. Simple as that. Over the past half-century or so, there has been a noticeable upsurge in earthquakes and volcanism on this planet, which, when boiled down, means that there is a steadily increasing pressure on our tectonic plates. What's causing it? The gradually melting ice caps. A cubic foot of water weighs about 67 pounds. Multiply that by several thousand millions, and we have the 12-inch rise in the world's oceans since 1900 AD. The weight of ice at the polar regions lessens correspondingly, of course, but now all that melted ice filling the basins of the world's oceans is making its influence felt at the lower latitudes in the form of increasing pressure on the tectonic plates. A hell of a trade-off, isn't it? Continue global warming and volcanism will continue to increase. Stop it, and the oceans stop rising and the vile vortices reactivate. The vile vortices are a natural phenomenon. We should bring them back. If and when Kilauea shuts down and global volcanism itself curtails, how will the vile vortices react? Will their time warps resume their random behavior once again? Or will their strange activities return with a vengeance, their windows staying open longer, widening their reach? Or might they behave in a universal manner and grab people from almost anywhere? like that which was promised in the book of Matthew, chapter 24, verses 40 and 41. Then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken, the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, one shall be taken, the other left. Is that how the rapture will work? Will God simply beam up His chosen? Does He, as we like to believe, make the selections Himself? The Bible specifies that only 144,000 will be taken out of the world's 6 billion population. Where's my calculator? Let's see now. That'll be only 1 in 42,000 people. One righteous person from 42,000 wannabes. And of course, most of us hope that we are that one. Looks like most of us ain't going to make it. I hope that isn't how the rapture will work, because the very concept reduces God to a mere selectionist, the mere head of a promotion board. Surely, as the manager of the entire universe, He has better things to do. Supreme genius that He is, He would have taken measures eons ago to have such selections done automatically, through some natural mechanism, of which He has plenty available, energies, frequencies. The concept isn't so alien. 6 billion people on Earth, mostly negative hypocrites. The few chosen are the positive, loving, righteous, caring people. When the majority of negative, uncaring people have managed to lower the frequencies of humanity to a certain point, namely below that of the righteous, the loving and caring frequencies will trigger the assimilation automatically, and the righteous will be whisked away to another dimension of time. The remainder, attuned to their declining frequencies, will be left behind to make the best of what little they have, namely those things which don't weigh much on God's divine scales. All of creation itself is frequency, every bit of it. Any student of physics who pays attention knows that. In physics, there are only two known constants: matter and energy. It is frequency which brings them together into physical form. But separate the matter from energy by altering the frequency which holds them together, and the form dematerializes. It's gone. The vile vortices work the same way, though they don't select by character. Venture into one of these windows at the wrong time, speed, or direction, and physical oblivion. It's another of those many energies we know nothing about, and it's damn well time we did. It needs to be studied, especially with respect to this 19.5 degree energy band, where our reality can merge with hyperdimensionality. We need to know how Earth's invisible big red spot behaves. How and when its windows open, what causes them to open and then close. Simply asserting, officially, that the vile vortices aren't there because we can't see them is like the ostrich who sticks its head in the sand to get away from it all. Primitive. Fearful. These extra-dimensional energy bands have been around since God began spinning the planets. And we're not the first to have to put up with their mysteries. Other civilizations knew of them long before we came along. Indeed, they may even have figured them out and left instructions for us in the manner in which certain great earthworks were arranged upon the planet. Your attention is invited to those diagonal lines just west of the Bermuda Triangle. North Bimini's shark mound is on one of them, actually within the triangle. The shark is a low sand effigy mound. It's 500 feet long and, presently, only 5 feet above sea level. Should be lost to the rising ocean levels pretty soon. But notice the direction in which the shark swims. 216 degrees. A little further west, hunting in Florida's Everglades swamp, itself about 10 feet above sea level, is the 5,500-foot-long mother of Giza's kitten, the Sphinx, better known to us as the Panther Mound. Notice, too, her direction of travel, 36 degrees. A bit to the north is the Rock Eagle up in Georgia. It's one of but few Aboriginal stone monuments in North America. Notice the direction of its flight. So far then, things that move in the oceans, walk on land, or fly. Further into America's heartland at South Portsmouth, Kentucky, we have the remains of the device effigy. I call it device because first, it is unnamed, and second, it certainly isn't the effigy of anything that walks, crawls, swims, or flies. Whatever it represented was man-made. Not much remains of it today owing to urban expansionism, but notice where it points on a heading of 216 degrees. So, 36 degrees, 216 degrees, 36, 216. Isn't anyone paying attention? Or perhaps it's just a matter of not caring. There was also, at one time, a huge eagle effigy down in Florida. But as with so many other North American earthworks, it got in the way. So it was obliterated in favor of improved inland navigation. What happens when a page is torn from a book of knowledge? The knowledge is lost. So we order another copy. But in this instance, the book of the Matrix is out of print. I have no doubt that I could replace this page of the Great Eagle because I can read the Pyramid Matrix like most people can read a newspaper. But why should I? Somebody would only tear it out again. Gotta have room for all those cabin cruisers and motorboats, what? Others tore out that page, not me. They didn't want the eagle. And with that page now missing, I cannot expand this discussion. So you're on your own. Fragments only. 36 degrees, 216 degrees, 36, 216. Azimuths which run in direct opposition in the realm of the circle. Pieces only, but if the right minds try to piece this puzzle together, the missing pieces aren't so hard to find. For example, one of the aircraft lost in the Bermuda Triangle was the British Star Aerial Transport on January 17, 1949. It's a matter of record that its last reported heading was 216 degrees. The rest is up to the management. For code buffs, there were additional clues in my newsletters 31 and 32, if you're interested in assembling puzzles. As for the Star Aerial, she is gone, to us. But where? She is still somewhere. So don't give up looking for her. All she did was to get tangled up in the Earth's invisible and ever-moving big red spot. So avoid headings of 36 and 216 degrees. And by the way, these windows in time are activated by another poorly understood natural energy, sunlight. The positive see sunlight as a key to good health. The negative see it as a source of skin cancer. Again, our attitudes. Anyway, these photos we see showing Jupiter's big red spot are always taken on its sunlit side. Here on Earth, when our people and wares vanish in the Bermuda Triangle, it's in the daylight hours. Something else to consider. Report concluded. Thank you for your kind attention. God bless those who are not afraid to learn, and God help those who are. Remember now, it's all a matter of attitude.